It was a trash system. I'm returning it. Give me my money back. With just a glance at the system under quality check, Chris Wilson, the general contractor's boss, declared it trash. At that moment, the tension I had been feeling snapped. All right, let's pretend it never happened. Following Chris's wish, I deleted the system from the server. Despite working hard to improve the system, why do I have to endure this treatment? After Chris left the company, I received incessant calls from him 3 days later. Hey, you, do something about this. What are you talking about all of a sudden? Hearing Chris's panicked voice made me laugh from the depths of my stomach. It's a disaster because you deleted the system. Get to our company right away. This was the moment to settle everything and make Chris apologize. I walked through the company's entrance feeling like a hero going into battle. I am Mike Taylor, a 42-year-old system engineer. I am responsible for developing and designing computer systems that clients need. Since I've always liked machines, I found the work of an engineer fulfilling. The time spent facing the computer and working diligently every day is comforting. I was dedicated to completing the tasks ordered by the prime contractor company meticulously. This project involved building a sales management and ordering system for a hair salon in New York. I teamed up with my colleague, Joseph Anderson, to tackle this project. Joseph is bright and has strong communication skills, unlike me. For someone like me who struggles with communication, having Joseph around is reassuring. Let's do our best again this time. Yeah, let's make something great. Joseph was fully motivated, focusing on the monitor. Just as I hoped to continue working in this enthusiastic environment, a phone call brought me back to reality. It was Chris Wilson, the sales manager of the prime contractor company. Chris was promoted to sales manager about 2 months ago. He is forceful and often doesn't read the room, frequently displaying arrogance towards subcontractors. Lacking confidence in interpersonal relationships and being inarticulate. It seems I've caught Chris's attention. Every time we meet, he makes sarcastic remarks about my gloomy face. If he's calling me, he probably wants to make another sarcastic remark. Bracing myself for his sharp words, I reluctantly answered the phone. Hey, you're doing well, right? You should be grateful I got this contract for you. Chris's intimidating opening line made my stomach tighten. Usually, sales department employees handle these things, but this time, Chris is directly overseeing us. Well, the work has just started, so I can't say much yet. Chris let out a big sigh and yelled at me, as my voice naturally shrank in fear. What a pathetic voice. Can't you even thank me? If this causes any trouble for the client and leads to damages, you'll be responsible. Be prepared. Even after the call ended, my heart was still pounding, but as I turned back to the screen and started typing, I began to regain my composure. Joseph looked at me with concern, but I nodded to show I was okay. However, my hope to complete this project smoothly was crushed by Chris's constant interference. A month of relentless work passed, as we had multiple meetings with the client to build the hair salon sales management and ordering system. Typically, it's the sales team's job to carefully listen to the client's needs. But calling Chris for inquiries was pointless. Can't you just ask them yourself? I'm busy. I understood that Chris had other responsibilities as the manager. If you're too busy, can you assign someone else? Meeting with the client isn't part of my job. When I said this clearly, Chris yelled furiously over the phone. Change the person in charge. Who do you think you are? Talking like that when you're just a subcontractor. I can cancel the contract anytime. For a moment, I thought it might be better for my sanity if the contract were cancelled. However, after a month of meetings and understanding the client's needs, I couldn't just quit for my own convenience. Joseph, who had worked hard with me, would be disappointed if I quit. Though I felt anger at Chris's unreasonable behavior, I swallowed it down. I'm sorry. Good. We have 2 months until the deadline, so do your job properly. After the call ended, Joseph spoke to me as I slumped in my chair. All we can do is make a great system. Let's show Chris he's wrong after this. Yeah, you're right. For the next 2 months, we worked against the clock, deeply considering what the client wanted from the system. As the system neared completion, having overcome numerous specification changes and tests, the goal was finally in sight. While we were fixing bugs and summarizing support policies, Chris, who had mostly communicated by phone, suddenly appeared in our office. Isn't it done yet? You're dragging your feet. The deadline is near. Chris threw his bag on the floor and shook his body, not hiding his irritation. We're testing to ensure the system works correctly. We're not dragging our feet. Testing the system for proper functionality is crucial, but Chris is just pressuring us to finish quickly. Let me see. I know enough about systems. Chris grinned and looked at the monitor, then suddenly said something unbelievable. It's a trash system. I'm returning it. Give me my money back. With just a glance at the system under quality check, Chris declared it trash, snapping the tension I'd been feeling. I'd always been intimidated by Chris, but at this point, I didn't care anymore. All right, let's pretend it never happened. Although the system took over 3 months to build, including design, I deleted it from the server as Chris wanted. I could make something like this myself. You subcontractors act so high and mighty, but you're no longer needed. Chris walked away in high spirits, thinking he was done with us, as Joseph and I watched him leave. We had worked hard to make the system great, so why did we deserve this treatment? I clenched my fists tightly, considering my next steps. I came up with an idea, patted Joseph on the shoulder, who was biting his lip in frustration, and said, "This is where the real fight begins. I need your help, Joseph." Joseph, eyes wide open, nodded enthusiastically at my suggestion and quickly turned to the computer. 3 days after Chris left the company, he started calling me incessantly. I ignored it for a while, but the constant ringing forced me to answer reluctantly. "Hey, you, fix this." "What are you talking about?" As expected, Chris's voice was frantic, which made me laugh from deep within. "Everything's a mess because you deleted the system. Get to our company now." Joseph and I headed to Chris's company, which was 2 train stops away from ours. We were determined to settle everything and make Chris apologize. I felt like a hero going into battle as I walked through the company's entrance. In the lobby, Johnson, the president of the prime contractor company, was pacing with a pale face. Seeing our faces, his eyes narrowed angrily, indicating his fury. "Are you the 2 Chris mentioned? Come to the president's office." It was unprecedented for Johnson to personally lead us to the president's office. The employees in the lobby were murmuring, and I felt uneasy. Joseph, gripping his bag tightly, patted my shoulder to calm me. In the president's office, Chris was there. Contrary to his usual arrogant expression, he looked weary and furrowed his brow. Johnson gestured for Joseph and me to sit on the sofa, then glared at Chris. "Chris, explain the situation to them again." "Yes." Chris, wiping the sweat from his broad forehead with a handkerchief, began speaking hesitantly. "This engineer from Mike's subcontractor company made a sloppy system. When I pointed it out, Mike got angry, deleted the nearly finished system, and threatened to make me pay for it. With the deadline approaching, I had no choice but to design the program myself." Chris's blatant lies left me speechless. I stood up and loudly denied his claims. "That's a lie. Yes, I deleted the system, but it was under Chris's orders." As Johnson listened silently, Chris sneered at me. "Yeah, you deleted it. Because of you, our company is in chaos. The system I painstakingly made isn't working, and we won't meet the delivery deadline. Our credibility is in shambles." Chris dismissed the system we created as trash and boasted that he could make one himself just by typing in the text. He really didn't understand the complexities of system design. I realized that any system created in 3 days would be full of flaws. Chris, with tears in his eyes, now pleaded passionately to Johnson. Because of these two, our sales department has suffered significant losses. They should be held accountable immediately. Seeing Chris's desperate attitude and Johnson's stern face, I felt a strong sense of unease. I had found the client for this project to be very flexible. So, I couldn't believe that negotiations to extend the deadline had fallen apart. What kind of damage had Chris caused while designing the system? If Chris, an amateur, tried to design the system and ended up deleting much of the customer data the sales department had, and then caused the customer management system to fail, it seems the responsibility lies with Mike. What do you think? Noticing our puzzled expressions, Johnson softened his tone and asked us. Chris probably tampered with their customer management system as a model for his design. He must have damaged the important data system, resulting in defects. Our company also manages this company's customer management system. If we check the backup data and fix the system, it might work. Chris's eyes widened at my words, and his face lit up. You should have said that earlier. I worried for nothing. Chris, back to his usual sarcastic attitude, was confronted by Joseph this time. More importantly, it wasn't our responsibility that Chris had to design the system. Please correct that. Joseph slammed his fist on the table, startling Chris. I followed Joseph's lead and explained to Johnson. Chris called our nearly finished system trash and ordered us to delete it. We had been meticulously designing the system and holding meetings with the client on Chris's behalf. We never threatened to cause damage. Chris leaned forward, arguing back at us. There's no proof. You're just making this up, President. Don't be deceived by them. Joseph had been waiting for this and pulled a small device from his bag. He thrust it in front of Chris and shouted, We do have proof. Since we can't afford to take notes during work, we always use a voice recorder. On the day Chris ordered the system to be deleted, this recorder was running. Let me play it for you. Chris, now pale, glanced back and forth between the device and us, unable to form words. On the day Chris pressured me to delete the system, I had anticipated he might shift the blame later, so I had Joseph check the voice recorder. Everything Chris said, from calling the system trash to demanding a refund, was recorded in his voice. As Chris's irrational and tyrannical words filled the president's office, Johnson listened, trembling with anger. Chris, this is completely different from what you told me because of your actions. Our company is facing significant losses. Johnson, his anger finally exploding, yelled at Chris, who was now pale. But Mike is the one who actually deleted the system. Chris mumbled excuses, seemingly unaware of his mistake. Chris, you know about the Subcontract Act, right? Unjust returns or refusal to accept goods by the prime contractor can be reported to the Fair Trade Commission. The Subcontract Act in the US is designed to protect subcontractors, who often find themselves in a weaker position against the prime contractors. Therefore, a proper contract must be signed, and both parties must follow the rules. Chris's unilateral demand to delete the system violated the Subcontract Act. Such a violation could escalate into a lawsuit involving the entire company. With our testimony and the recorded audio, the situation is unfavorable for the prime contractor. We will report the unfair treatment we received from Chris to the appropriate authorities. At my words, Chris's face turned red with anger for a moment. But then, under Johnson's furious glare, his face went white. Chris bit his lip and trembled. President Johnson, please look at this. Joseph quickly pulled out a copy of the contract made in Chris's name and the document detailing the subcontractor fees for this project. This was Joseph's ace in the hole to corner Chris. Johnson frowned and carefully examined the documents Joseph handed him. We checked the subcontractor fees through our own accounting. We wanted to know the amount of damage if this project was cancelled. We found a slight discrepancy from the amount stated in the contract, so we closely examined the items and found something suspicious. Joseph noticed the payment was less than expected and focused on the fees and business coordination management costs listed by Chris. After consulting with accounting, it was explained that the management costs were incurred when coordinating business between the client and the subcontractor outside of regular working hours or on holidays. Due to deadline changes or system improvements, prime contractors sometimes need to take irregular actions, hence the management fees. However, we had never asked Chris to coordinate any tasks, nor were there any transactions that incurred fees. In other words, Chris was attempting to fraudulently deduct these fictitious tasks from the subcontractor fees. Reducing the payment amount unilaterally also violates the Subcontract Act. Can you clearly explain these tasks to President Johnson? Chris, not expecting us to dig this deep, was stunned into silence. He glared at Joseph for a moment, then slumped his shoulders in defeat and shook his head. The next moment, he threw himself at Johnson's feet, begging, "This discrepancy is my mistake. I never intended to steal any money." Seeing the usually arrogant Chris groveling on the floor, Joseph wore a look of triumph. "Chris, you're apologizing to the wrong people." Whether he ignored Johnson's advice or was too stubborn to apologize to us, Chris didn't say a word of apology in our direction. "Mike, Joseph, I sincerely apologize for Chris's actions. We'll make sure he pays for his illegal conduct." Johnson stood up from the president's seat and apologized deeply to us. His demeanor showed his willingness to take responsibility as a president. "Please raise your head." "That's right. Let's leave the rest to the proper authorities." Chris stared at Johnson, who was apologizing, with a look of disbelief. While I appreciated Johnson's handling of the situation as the company's top, I still had questions for Chris. "By the way, Chris, why did you, as a department head, take on this project yourself? Couldn't you have assigned it to a subordinate?" Chris looked like he had swallowed a bitter pill and didn't answer my question. Suddenly, Johnson started laughing, surprising not only us but also Chris. "Mike, do you know how you are regarded in our industry?" I tilted my head in confusion and looked at Joseph, who smiled and answered Johnson's question. "I've heard some people call Mike a super engineer. I didn't realize President Johnson also knew this nickname." "That's right. Mike is called a super engineer because he handles every project flawlessly and provides perfect aftercare. When I saw your name as the project lead, I wondered if you were the super engineer Mike." Johnson looked impressed, but I was puzzled, while Joseph grinned with delight. "I didn't know I was called that, but if it's true, I'm honored." The moment I answered seriously, Chris, who had been quietly apologizing, suddenly stood up and kicked the president's desk in front of me. "It's wrong for a gloomy subcontractor like you to be praised as a super engineer. Without us getting the jobs, you wouldn't have any work." Seeing Chris furious and telling me not to get carried away sent a sharp tension through my body. I remembered how Chris always made sarcastic remarks and threatened me. But I realized this was Chris's way of resisting the recognition I received in this industry. "Mr. Chris, we could say the same. Without the systems we design, sales can't function, and it's our technical skills that allow you to pitch to other companies." Chris seemed to be struggling to find words to attack me, his mind nearly overloaded. "Mike is right. Sales and engineering shouldn't be compared to see which is superior. They should support each other. I don't understand Chris's attitude towards Mike, but you need to change your perspective." When Johnson said this clearly, Chris looked defeated and slumped his shoulders. Chris still seemed unsatisfied, and I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. Then a hypothesis about Chris's behavior came to mind. Could it be that this project was a setup by Mr. Chris to ruin my reputation? I hoped my hypothesis was wrong, but Johnson looked as if everything made perfect sense. Chris snorted and responded with a sneering smile. "I wanted to expose your true nature and change that undeserved nickname. But now that the system for this project is deleted, your reputation is in the gutter. Serves you right." Johnson and Joseph watched Chris's deranged laughter with pained expressions. I felt a surge of anger at Chris for nearly ruining this project out of personal spite. You wasted the client's system over something so petty. This might have been the first time I had raised my voice in defiance against Chris. Chris, wide-eyed in surprise, stopped his eerie laughter. I don't claim my skills are the best, but my dedication to the clients is unmatched. I can't stay silent while that commitment is disregarded. This client had poured their efforts into their salon's growth. Joseph and I had simply translated that hope into the system's design. Chris had not only abandoned his sales duties, but had also exploited the client to harass me. Such actions were intolerable, and my blood boiled with rage. Although the system was temporarily deleted, we've confirmed that the backup is intact, so there's no issue. We will complete this project responsibly. Mr. Chris should face the appropriate consequences. Suppressing my anger, I said this with a smile, and Chris gritted his teeth in frustration. Damn it, I thought it was deleted. Chris's voice, filled with hatred, echoed through the president's office as Joseph and I quickly left. Feeling refreshed, Joseph and I left Chris's company, sharing a high five and our joy. Now we needed to return to our company, restore the system, and resume testing. We also had to address the customer management system for the sales department, which Johnson had carefully requested. Let's grab a meal first. Yeah, I feel like eating something hearty. We'll need the energy. With that, we heartily devoured large bowls at a beef bowl shop by the station, and then headed back to our company. A week passed since the incident with Chris, and we were finally done fixing the system. While we quickly restored our design system, rebuilding the customer management system that Chris had destroyed was quite a challenge. We found not only typos, but also missing crucial parts of the system, which made me scream in frustration. The sales department employees were also furious with Chris, complaining about his poor work attitude and condescending behavior towards subordinates. With the employees' voices and our evidence, Chris was inevitably disciplined. Having completed the project and Johnson's request, Joseph and I are now celebrating with a toast at a beer hall. By the way, did you hear about Chris? He was demoted by President Johnson, who was furious about this incident, and then he quit the company. When we reported the matter to the Fair Trade Commission, an investigation into the prime contractor company began immediately. Joseph and I breathed a sigh of relief when we heard from accounting that the correct amount had been paid for Johnson's request. Chris's project. Well, maybe it's a blessing we weren't sued for damages. Chris, who was demoted from sales manager, was looked down upon by his subordinates and eventually left the company because he couldn't stand it. Johnson later told us that if we hadn't completed this project, Chris would have been held responsible for the damages. I heard he hasn't been able to find another job since he left the company. Despite being a sales manager, he left without any significant achievements. With his arrogant personality, finding another sales job would be difficult. 5 days later, I saw Chris walking near the employment office with vacant eyes, and I felt a sense of relief and freedom from the fear and tension he had caused me. Hey, super engineer, we need your help with this new system, Joseph jokingly said to me as he brought in a new project. Stop calling me that. Today, we're back at our keyboards, designing a future where everyone can be happy through this project. Together with my partner, I want to continue contributing to making USA's future brighter.